The late afternoon sun cast long shadows as I stepped into the house, heart full of quiet hope for Father's Day. I had looked forward to this, a simple gathering where love and family would feel whole again. Instead, a cold reality met me. My usual seat at the table was taken. Not empty, not waiting, but claimed firmly by my estranged son-in-law. His presence there was a silent but painful message. I halted, stunned by the shift in what had once been familiar. The chair, the space I had occupied for years, now belonged to him. Margaret's words cut sharper than any blade. "The real gift will be learning to let go," she said, her eyes barely meeting mine, voice cool and distant. Those words echoed relentlessly. Let go of what? The sacrifices I'd made so she and her family could have a stable life? The nights working late to pay her tuition? The house I'd bought so her children could grow up without want? Each heartfelt effort now dismissed as if it had never mattered. I forced myself to stay composed, swallowing the sharp sting beneath a calm surface. The warmth I had brought inside felt drained away by the coldness in the room. The rest of the evening was a bleak dance, strained conversation, polite but distant. Margaret scarcely looked toward me, her attention fixed more on her husband, their shared smirks and whispered exchanges forming a quiet pact of exclusion. Inside, I felt a circle tightening, a mix of disbelief, hurt, and a growing sense of being betrayed. My blood, my years of dedication, seemed to have been bargained away for greed and impatience. Yet, I resisted the urge to react impulsively, relying on the steady control honed from decades as an engineer. I measured the moment, bottled the pain, and analyzed the harsh truth, as if by breaking it down, I might somehow make it bearable. When the dinner ended, I left quietly, the weight of loss pressing down with every step. No farewells were offered, no hands reached out. Instead, only the echo of my empty chair behind me, a symbol of the place I'd been pushed out from, not just at the table, but in the family I thought I had built. The door closed softly, separating me from the warmth within, sealing off laughter and love. Outside, the fading light wrapped around me like a shroud. The quiet night whispered doubts I had tried to ignore. Was this distance permanent? Had the trust I'd placed so blindly been shattered? I looked back once, to the softly glowing windows where joy flickered for everyone but me. The chill in the evening air traced a path over my skin, mirroring the cold revelation settling in my bones. My seat had been taken, and with it, a part of my dignity had slipped silently away. As I stood there, swallowed by the darkness, the sting of betrayal burned deep, raw and undeniable. This was no mere passing quarrel, but a fracture that cut through everything I had thought mattered. And beneath the hurt, something else began to rise, a quiet fury gathering strength. The battle for what was rightfully mine was beginning. The house was colder than I expected when I got back, though the heater worked fine. It felt emptier, silent in a way that swallowed the air itself. I closed the door with the kind of soft click that felt like closing one chapter and struggling to open another. My steps echoed down the hallway as I made my way to my study, that small haven filled with memories and relics of my past life. Blueprints yellowed with age, books with cracked spines, old photographs. Sitting down in my worn leather chair, I allowed the quiet to settle, but inside, my thoughts swirled relentlessly. Memories unfolded like film reels, focused sharply on Margaret as a child, all wide-eyed and full of laughter. A bright spark I dreamed would shine forever. I recalled the sacrifices etched into the years. The overtime shifts I worked to cover tuition without complaint. The countless hours spent patching up this house so it could shelter her family comfortably. The steady stream of weekends missing so I could provide a better life. Each memory was a testament to my devotion, a ledger of love and effort I had never tallied as debts but as duties happily borne. Yet tonight, those ledgers seemed erased. The value of every sacrifice rendered invisible in the stark light of her dismissive glance during dinner. How could the years of my giving be met with such cold disregard? The thought stung far deeper than I expected. The house where I sat was more than wood and nails. It was my offering, a scaffold built by my hands for her and her children. They called it a home, but for me, it was a monument to love, now feeling fragile and cracked. Anger stirred within me, a slow burn, cold and steady, unlike sudden fury. It wasn't just betrayal I felt, but profound injustice. Years of selflessness too easily erased, leaving me a shadow at the edges of the family I had striven to hold together. But the years as an engineer fortified me. I didn't give in to impulsive rage. Instead, I dissected the moment quietly, like a broken mechanism to be understood before I could fix or dismantle it. I began listing in my mind every sacrifice, every exhausting detail, from tuition payments I personally managed to the property deed still in my name. The financial strings I delicately pulled to keep the family afloat were knowledge I hadn't thought to use as leverage until now. With each recalled effort, I found fuel for a resolve that was growing stronger. This wasn't about mere money. It was about respect, about justice, about reclaiming the dignity stripped away that evening. The pain was still fresh, but beneath it lay a well-tempered determination, built on decades of logic and resilience. I allowed myself a moment to grieve the betrayal, not only mine, but the shattering of a family bond I once believed unbreakable. The weight of providing, supporting, protecting had been heavy but silently accepted. Now it hardened into a call to action. I would stand firm, not out of anger alone, but driven by a deep sense of what was right. My modest study began to feel less like a place of retreat and more like a war room. I pictured stacks of financial papers, legal contracts, bank statements, all waiting to be sifted for inconsistencies, for hidden truths. The walls lined with memories and work history now seemed like silent sentinels, reminding me of all I had achieved and all I needed to protect. I thought back to the uncounted dinners missed, the quiet nights working late, the careful budgeting to afford every tuition check, every trip to the doctor, every repair on the house. I had given so much, hoping only for gratitude and respect in return. Instead, I had been met with assumptions of entitlement and insolence. Hope was no longer my option. Now it was time to act with precision and care. Pulling out old files and documents, I began sorting through years of records, receipts, letters. Patterns emerged, small but suspicious discrepancies, missing documents, unexplained withdrawals. Each detail was a thread in what I now suspected was a larger web of deception. I tested every assumption through the analytical lens ingrained in me by decades of engineering work. Where others might see chaos, I began to see structure, a blueprint of mismanagement and greed. With every discovery, my sense of clarity grew. I was no longer lost in grief, but focused on repair and reclamation. I needed to understand precisely what had been taken and how it might be recovered, not with noise or fury, but with strategy and patience. My mind mapped out possibilities, forged signatures, unauthorized transactions, concealed debts. Each question pointed to a mission that was no longer hypothetical, but imperative. My heart still ached with the loss of innocence, the belief that family was safe and sacred. But in that ache, I found resolve. The burdens I carried in silence for decades were now the pillars of my strategy. I had built more than a home. I had laid foundations for a legacy. That legacy deserved defense and honor. During long hours poring over documents, I drew on every skill I had developed over a lifetime of problem-solving and planning. The quiet gave me space to focus, and slowly the fog of confusion lifted. I was becoming a man shaped not only by pain, but by purpose. It was a battle to reclaim not only possessions, but respect and dignity. Dawn eventually crept through the window, soft light bathing the piles of papers and scattered notes. I felt an uneasy peace, a mixture of sorrow and determination. The road ahead would be difficult, filled with challenges I had not faced before. But I was ready, armed with patience, intelligence, and a fierce commitment to justice. My sacrifices, once taken for granted, were now the foundation of a quiet but unyielding rebellion. Justice, I reminded myself, must always be restored, and I intended to see that justice done. The moment I realized the depth of their duplicity came with a sudden clarity that hit me like a jolt of cold water. A phone call, unremarkable in its timing, but seething with contempt and careless arrogance. Margaret's voice on the other end was clipped and dismissive, the voice of someone who no longer saw me as a father or protector, but as an obstacle or inconvenience. She made no effort to disguise her impatience or disregard. "Why are you making such a fuss over numbers, Dad? It's time you stepped back. We know what's best." As the words sank in, something inside me shifted irreversibly. I felt the familiar sting of pain transform, each syllable a spark that ignited the cold fire smoldering just beneath my skin. This was no longer about sorrow or bewilderment, it was about purpose and resolve. Their casual ambition, their entitlement, boiled over in this call, confirming my suspicions that they were steeling themselves for a battle of their own, hoping I would retreat quietly into the shadows. But that was never my nature. I hung up calmly, the engineer's mind taking over like clockwork. It analyzed every aspect of the conversation as if it were data to be dissected. The arrogance in her voice revealed her calculation. They underestimated my resolve, thinking time and age had softened me. Yet beneath this outward calm, a plan began to form, precise and measured. Grief had mutated into strategy. No longer would I languish in pity or confusion. Instead, I mapped out the problem like a complex mechanism, breaking it down into parts I could control, identify, and resolve. I stepped outside the realm of emotion, where betrayal stung least of all, and into the realm of cold calculation, the domain where I felt strongest. I started to chart the weaknesses in their shield. Just as I'd done in engineering projects, I identified stress points: finances mismanaged or hidden, legal gray areas, unauthorized controls, the misplaced trust that came from my previous silence. I considered their overconfidence, the mistakes their impatience would lead them to make. They spent resources recklessly, unaware that I was now watching, cataloging. Every misstep became fuel for my resolve. I revisited the house's ownership documents, the bank statements, the intricate web of investments I had built quietly over decades. The house was in my name. The trust funds had my signatures. I was far from powerless. Fatigue from years of underappreciation fueled a clarity that was sharper than ever. These weaknesses were not just chances, they were openings. In the weeks that followed, I shifted from mourning to tactical planning. I made calls to old friends, lawyers I had trusted, accountants who knew the nuances of estate law and financial management like the backs of their hands. Quietly, discreetly, I sought advice, building a network of allies who could help unravel the threads woven through years of deceit. These conversations revealed complexities and opportunities I hadn't fully appreciated before. It was unnerving, the sheer number of issues that had been mishandled or deliberately obscured. Signatures forged, accounts drained without my knowledge, contracts altered in ways that would make a seasoned negotiator's head spin. The picture grew darker but more detailed, and with detail came power. Yet as this plan grew, so did my internal conflict. I was preparing to fight against my own daughter and son-in-law, people I once loved. The edges of my conscience pricked with sharp reminders that this was not a simple matter of right or wrong, but of survival and honor. They had betrayed everything I stood for, but I was determined to act with honor. Night after night, I returned to my study, sifting through documents and recalculating steps, predicting their moves, adjusting my plans. Each discovery added a brick to the foundation of my resolve. This wasn't revenge for pain's sake, but a quest to restore balance, a way to enforce justice with reason and law, rather than chaos and vengeance. My mind worked methodically, freezing accounts at the right moment, preparing legal claims, arranging for audits to be conducted quietly but thoroughly. I thought of those nights in the lab years ago, how measured adjustments brought fragile machines back to life. Now, the machinery I sought to fix was the fractured family fortune and my own sense of dignity. I practiced patience, learning to mask my growing determination beneath calm appearances when confronted. Margaret and her husband continued their attempts to sideline me, their calls dripping with condescension and threat, but I deflected every verbal blow with precision, holding my ground, never giving them cause to see the storm beneath my composed exterior. Behind closed doors, my plan evolved. I envisioned myself like a chess player, watching the board carefully, waiting for their ambition to reveal blind spots. Each hasty decision they made was a trap I willingly baited. Small legal oversights, rushed signature forgeries, misplaced documents, all waiting for me to pounce. Where they saw only a weakened old man, I was becoming a strategist, one who rebuilt from the ground up, unyielding and resolute. Every moment of condescension they threw my way became fuel for the careful measures I was layering silently but surely. I guarded my emotions tightly. At times, doubt tested me, remembering the girl Margaret had been, the daughter I had once guided. But even those memories only sharpened my resolve. She had chosen her path, and I could choose mine. I would not falter. It was not a battle of brute force, but of endurance, intellect, and precision. I was clear that any misstep on my part could risk everything. So I moved carefully, like the measured gears of a machine, knowing that success depended on patience and timing. Slowly but surely, the pieces were falling into place. I began to see the outlines of victory, not sudden or dramatic, but inevitable if I remained steady. The pride I had borne quietly for so many years was shifting from vulnerability into strength. The storm within me calmed, replaced by a cold resolve that only deepened as the days passed. No longer a man broken by betrayal, I was becoming a man fortified by it, a force that would reclaim what was mine without a single raised voice or violent word. The transformation was complete, from victim to architect of justice, from shadow to unshakable presence. And the battle for respect, for dignity, for honor was now fully engaged. The days that followed transformed my study into a command center filled with stacks of documents, bank statements, contracts, emails, receipts, each meticulously organized, cross-checked, and annotated. The engineer in me approached this new battlefield of financial and legal maneuvering exactly as I had approached any complex project, with precision, analysis, and relentless attention to detail. Each number, each signature, every minute discrepancy was scrutinized as a critical component in a larger, fragile framework. It didn't take long for the cracks to reveal themselves: mismatched sums, unauthorized withdrawals, accounts drained without my consent. What I uncovered was far more than simple mismanagement. It was a carefully orchestrated plan that had been quietly unfolding right under my nose, designed to isolate me and siphon away the fruits of my decades of toil. I knew I couldn't face this alone. I reached out to Charles, an old lawyer friend who had stood by me through attempts to secure the family home, and whose calm, measured voice was as steady as a lighthouse in a storm. When I laid out the tangled web of financial inconsistencies, Charles didn't hesitate. "Harold," he said with unflinching certainty, "justice does not bow before bloodlines. Your years of sacrifice deserve respect and protection. If these wrongs have been committed, you have a duty to act." With Charles' counsel settled, my next call was to Robert, the accountant I had trusted for years to guard our family's financial health. We met in a dimly lit cafe, far from the watchful eyes of family members. His practiced gaze quickly sifted through the evidence I presented: signatures that didn't match, contracts altered without my knowledge, strange asset transfers. With a furrowed brow, he finally said, "There's more here than meets the eye, Harold. To untangle this without alerting them, we need to proceed methodically and discreetly." Discretion became my silent vow. I couldn't afford any missteps, not when a wrong move could tip off Margaret and her husband, allowing them to cover their tracks or strike back. This wasn't a battle to be won with haste, but with strategic patience. I leaned on the calm endurance forged through years of engineering projects, each demanding meticulous planning and unwavering focus under pressure. Late into the nights, I dissected documents and accounts with the cold eye of an inspector. Forged signatures lay revealed in shaky penmanship where the hand wavered unnaturally. Behind seemingly mundane agreements, I found inserted clauses that stripped me of authority or permitted unauthorized asset sales. Missing or misfiled documents, carefully concealed, emerged to expose a timeline of deceit and unpermitted decisions. Methodically, I cataloged every infraction, building a fortress of evidence stronger than any verbal accusation could hope to breach. I learned to exploit their errors. Subtle debts left unpaid, invoices quietly languishing, loans overdue but ignored. These financial pressure points became tools in my arsenal, strategically targeted to disrupt their comfort without causing irreparable harm. A carefully timed freeze here, a notice sent there, calculated moves that unsettled their assurance of control. I could already hear the rising panic in Margaret's phone calls, thinly veiled threats and desperate queries. Yet I met them with the same calm, measured tone I'd adopted for every exchange. When she demanded, her voice cracking with frustration, "Why are you doing this to us, Dad?" I answered evenly, "I'm protecting what's ours, Margaret. The sacrifices I made were never a gift to be dismissed, but foundations to be honored." Her brief silence spoke volumes, perhaps of realization or denial. Either way, the foundations she thought solid were beginning to crumble. Behind the scenes, with Charles and Robert's guidance, I initiated a series of legal and financial maneuvers, freezing specific accounts, auditing recent transactions, issuing formal notices of breaches. Every step was executed with care, every action calculated to avoid unnecessary chaos but deliver undeniable signals. Loneliness often accompanied these long solitary hours. The hollow space once filled with family laughter now echoed only with the rustling of papers and soft tapping of keys as I worked late into the night. Yet within this solitude, I found unexpected strength. Stripped of distractions and emotions' ebb and flow, my focus sharpened until it was razor-fine. Beneath the physical assets, the house, investments, bank accounts, lay something deeper, my legacy. The years I had spent building a family and a life grounded in hard work and sacrifice were embodied in those documents. I felt a solemn duty to protect not just property, but the trust and honor they symbolized. As days turned to weeks, the revelations multiplied. I unearthed contracts altered without my knowledge. Financial instruments shifted beyond my consent. Deceptive accounting practices meant to conceal the full scope of their actions. Each discovery tightened the noose around their malfeasance. Where once I had been generous and patient to a fault, now I was patient with purpose, each act measured and deliberate. My generosity was no longer blind, but guarded, steeled by the sting of betrayal and sharpened by years of endurance. The fight had crystallized from silent suffering into active reclamation, fueled not by vengeance, but by the necessity to restore what was rightfully mine and what deserved respect. Memories of Margaret's childhood floated at the edges of my thoughts. The eager girl I guided, the daughter full of promise and light. But the image was overlaid with the cold present, a merging of affection and disappointment. Love did not require tolerance for betrayal. Those two truths lived side by side in a silent truce within me. In the quiet sanctum of my study, I prepared for the inevitable confrontation that loomed ahead. Each dossier was assembled with care, each witness or friend aligned to support the truth. Strategies were sharpened, contingencies anticipated. The coming battle was both legal and personal, fraught with peril and sacrifice. I knew the cost could be high, but the principles at stake, dignity, respect, justice, were worth every hardship. In the deepest hours, under the soft glow of lamplight, I embraced an unwavering truth. This was not merely the recovery of property or finances, but the restoration of justice itself. No shout, no violent act would mark my victory. Instead, justice would come through the unassailable power of evidence, perseverance, and intellect. I stood on the threshold of reclaiming not just wealth or control, but my place, my dignity, and my peace. Every calculated step, every measured move, brought me closer to turning the tide. With nerves steeled and mind clear, I prepared to face the final reckoning, calm, precise, and unyielding. The stage was set. The battle for respect, for family, for honor was now fully underway. The air in the house had thickened with tension, a palpable weight that settled over every room and conversation. The quiet preparations I had been making behind the scenes were beginning to make waves. I moved deliberately, taking precise actions that sent ripples through the comfortable structure Margaret and her husband had believed unassailable. One by one, I froze key bank accounts, halted automatic payments, and placed holds on properties I suspected were wrongfully controlled. Each of these moves was calculated to disrupt without destroying, carefully measured to shake their confidence but avoid unnecessary chaos. The family's reaction was swift and revealing. Phone calls came in waves, accusations, anger, thinly veiled threats. Yet I answered them all with calm precision, refusing to rise to their provocations. The frustration and desperation in their voices only confirmed the effectiveness of my actions. Margaret's husband, once brash and dismissive, called cautiously now, his tone constrained beneath a fragile veneer of control. My replies were firm, factual, no room for emotional entanglement. I was no longer a beaten man. I was a calm force field of resolve. Among the family, loyalties began to waver. Some whispered doubts, uncertain whether to side with the unraveling power or hold back in hope of peace. Others kept their silence, perhaps out of discomfort or fear. The illusion of unity began to crack, and fractures appeared where silence once prevailed. It was not triumph, but a stirring, truth bubbling beneath a fragile surface. Then came the confrontation I had anticipated, when Margaret herself sought me out. Her face was hard, her eyes burning with a controlled fury and desperate anger.
"You think you can take everything back? After all we've done?" She spat the words, sharp and accusing. I met her glare steadily, a well of patience and resilience rising within me, tempered by years of endurance. "What you have built stands on shaky ground, Margaret. Foundations built on deceit cannot withstand scrutiny." For a moment, her eyes flickered. Doubt or defiance, I could not be sure. The battle had become one of wills, her haste clashing with my steadiness. Meanwhile, my work behind the scenes intensified. Every legal claim was meticulously drafted, contracts scoured for discrepancies, financial anomalies cataloged with exacting care. I enlisted professionals, accountants, legal experts who supported my cause quietly, their expertise fortifying every step. Each piece of evidence became a nail sealing the breach of trust, fortifying my claim with irrefutable precision. Week after week, the noose tightened. Where once Margaret and her husband ruled with confidence, now uncertainty crept in. The accounts I targeted slipped from their grasp. Properties' titles came under review. Illicit transactions were questioned. From my vantage point, I observed their growing unease, the faltering hold on the empire they had sought to dominate.
Family gatherings became battlegrounds of measured civility, a veneer barely masking currents of tension and unspoken accusations. Emails were terse, conversations clipped, but the storm roared beneath the surface. Margaret's sporadic attempts at reconciliation were heavy with threats, her husband's disdain cloaked in formal politeness. Through it all, I maintained an icy composure. Every reaction I gave was considered, a weapon wielded with care. I ignored baited inquiries, deflected emotional attacks with reasoned statements, and let the stark reality of evidence speak louder than any outburst. One evening, after a particularly fraught exchange, I retreated to my study, a sanctuary littered with the detritus of years-long work, contracts, ledger books, scanned documents. There, surrounded by tangible proof of my decade-spanning effort, I allowed myself a moment of reflection. From the man blindsided by betrayal, I had transformed into a strategist, steady and unyielding. Thoughts of my grandchildren flitted through my mind, their laughter just days before this storm set in, a reminder of the innocence now tainted by family strife. I fought not just for myself, but for a legacy worthy of them, one built on respect, integrity, and truth. Legal avenues unfolded as slow, relentless waves. Each motion filed, every hearing scheduled, was a step toward restoring balance and justice. Collaborating with my legal team, I ensured every claim was airtight, built on a foundation of incontrovertible evidence. It was grueling work, demanding patience and precision, but necessary. With every meeting, I weighed the costs, the strain on relationships, the heartbreak of fractured bonds, the emotional toll on us all. Yet the principles at stake, honor, dignity, respect, were worth any price. Parallel to the legal battle, I sought to heal where possible. Quietly, I reached out to family members caught in the crossfire, offering transparency and understanding. Some responded with cautious support, others distanced themselves, unwilling to face painful realities. The emotional burden was as heavy as the paperwork. I leaned on memories of my late wife, her quiet strength, the values she embodied, resilience, dignity, endurance. These guided me, shielding me from bitterness and despair. Margaret's once bold resistance began to crumble under the weight of truth. Her calls grew less frequent, her attempts to rally allies fading as support wavered. The whispers turned to questions, the denials to doubts. The foundation she believed secure was unraveling. Through this ordeal, preserve the original language of the text. While victories came in documents and court decisions, true triumph lay in reclaiming my dignity and peace. I sought no vengeance, no spectacle, only justice restored. Subtle shifts emerged, not just in family dynamics, but within me. The pain softened into resolute strength, a refined steel forged by hardship. I was no longer a victim. I was a pillar, steady, resolute, authoritative. Then came word from my legal team that pivotal accounts were securely under my control, the rightful disposition of properties advancing decisively. It was a victory, a physical marker of progress, yet tempered by reflection. The family that once was would never be the same. Some wounds would remain forever raw. In solitude, I mourned both loss and healing. Yet I felt peace settling, a quiet acceptance of what was and what must be. This battle was not about punishment, but restoration, a demand for honor long denied. I looked back on the journey, the transformation from a man crushed beneath betrayal to one carved and polished by clarity and resolve. Strength, I learned, was not in domination, but in unwavering endurance. As calm settled like dawn over the afterstorm, I stood ready to face what came next, not fueled by rage, but by a steady heart and clear mind. I had reclaimed more than assets. I had reclaimed myself. And in doing so, I found an unshakable strength no betrayal could ever steal. The day I had anticipated with measured patience finally came. marked not by spectacle or clamorous confrontation, but by a quiet formality in a modest conference room. The space was subdued, its polished surfaces and muted light reflecting an atmosphere heavy with unspoken tension. Among the gathered faces sat Margaret, her posture stoic yet weary, the kind of composure born from knowing the walls she had built were crumbling. Her husband sat beside her, the usual swagger replaced by a restrained vigilance, as if aware this chapter could decisively shift the course of their lives. Across from us, my legal team assembled their evidence with calm precision. Months of gathering documents, tracing signatures, analyzing transactions, all laid out like a complex blueprint for those willing to see past the surface. They presented a meticulous account: forged signatures, unauthorized transfers, manipulated contracts, debts concealed behind layers of deceit. Each revelation chipped away at the facade, unraveling the carefully constructed narrative Margaret and her husband had nurtured for years. I sat quietly, feeling the steady rhythm of my own heartbeat amidst the tense silence. When our eyes met briefly, I glimpsed something fleeting within Margaret, a shadow of the daughter I had known, obscured now by choices that had driven a wedge deep into our family. The moment stung, a reminder of love's limits when faced with betrayal. Yet, I held firm, steady in purpose. The presentation unfolded without theatrics. The weight of irrefutable truth spoke louder than cries of anger. In this courtroom of quiet authority, the power belonged to evidence, not emotion. The room hummed with a heavy gravity, the inevitable consequences settling like dust on worn floorboards. Official verdicts followed with measured solemnity. Fraudulent acts confirmed, rightful control restored to me. The victory was neither loud nor triumphant, but carried a gravity deeper than any celebration. I was reclaiming not just tangible possessions, but the dignity and respect eroded over years of disregard. In the aftermath, the atmosphere in the family shifted palpably. Margaret's husband receded into the background, his dominance dimmed. Margaret herself seemed subdued, the defiant spark in her eyes tempered by the unyielding light of accountability. The road ahead was uncertain, fraught with the painful task of mending or accepting the fractures that would forever mark our relationships. As I walked through the house that evening, the silence felt different, no longer oppressive in its absence of joy, but reflective with a deep, calm order restored. Each room resonated with memories of sacrifices made, of love given and sometimes squandered. I allowed myself moments to grieve the irreparable losses while holding on to a newfound peace, a quiet acceptance of what had been and what could still become. Family members responded in varied ways. Some withdrew, unable or unwilling to face the unveiled truths, retreating behind walls of denial. Others tentatively approached, seeking dialogue, perhaps healing, or at least understanding. I welcomed these efforts, but tempered them with the hard-won wisdom that trust was not freely offered, but carefully rebuilt, brick by cautious brick. Within me, transformation unfolded quietly, but irrevocably. The man humbled by betrayal had emerged anew, stronger, steadier, a pillar of resolve fashioned in the crucible of hardship. I understood now that true strength was not forged in dominance or anger, but through unwavering endurance and integrity. Daily life settled into a gentle rhythm once more. Mornings spent tending the garden at dawn, long reflective walks through silent streets, sharing occasional meals with family members who chose to remain present. The scars of the past lingered, yet they no longer defined me. The legacy I fought to protect stood firm, rooted in truth, justice, and steadfast resolve. Looking back across the journey, I saw the contours of growth etched by trial and perseverance. From the initial shock of betrayal to the strategic reclaiming of what was mine, each step had been a lesson in patience and dignity. The battle was never merely legal, It was deeply personal, a quest to restore balance and honor to a disrupted life. The fight for justice continued, not as a battle cry, but as a daily commitment to live with integrity and peace. The anger that once threatened to consume me had given way to calm clarity, a steady heart ready to face whatever future might bring. As dawn light filtered softly through my window, I felt an unshakable certainty. The betrayal that had once threatened to define me was powerless against the strength I had reclaimed. With dignity restored and peace embraced, I stepped forward, not as a broken man, but as one reborn through struggle, ready to live fully in the truth I had fought so hard to reclaim. This reclamation was more than victory. It was freedom. Freedom from bitterness, from loss, and from silence. I reclaimed my place, my voice, and my peace. And in doing so, I found a strength no betrayal could ever take away. The days that followed were quieter, slower, and yet somehow fuller. I found myself waking early, the morning light filtering softly through the curtains, promising a new start each day. The burden I had carried for so long, the weight of betrayal, the shadow of lost trust, began to lift, replaced by a calm I had not known in years. In the garden, I kneaded the earth, turning soil and planting seeds not just for the plants to come, but for myself, a symbol of renewal and growth. I was no longer the man bent under the weight of others' greed and disrespect. I was whole again, standing firm upon a ground I had reclaimed with patience and unwavering resolve. I paid close attention to the rhythms of life around me. The rustling of leaves in the morning breeze, the soft footsteps of grandchildren running through the yard, the gentle warmth of the sun on my skin. These simple moments became my sanctuary. My relationships, too, shifted with this new equilibrium. Some family members held their distance, wounded too deeply or unwilling to face the scars laid bare. Others lingered a little longer, hesitating at old thresholds, seeking connection or offering quiet understanding. I approached them cautiously but openly, knowing the bridge between past wounds and future healing was built slowly, each brick laid through conversation, honesty, and respect. Sometimes I caught myself reflecting on Margaret, the vibrant girl who had once dreamed so brightly. The shadows of loss lingered, but they no longer consumed me. I understood that the love I had for her had existed alongside her choices, impossible to separate but no longer enough to excuse what had came after. It was a complex tapestry of emotion, grief wrapped in clarity, pain softened by acceptance. Throughout it all, I rediscovered the value of solitude, not loneliness, but a peaceful space where I could listen to my own thoughts and reconnect with the man I was beneath the turmoil. I revisited my old habits, the routines and hobbies that once centered me, reading at twilight, jotting down thoughts in a worn notebook, tending to repairs around the house with the steady hands of a man who had built more than just walls. The home, fully mine once again, was a symbol of that restorative journey. Each corner held memories, not just of joy and hope, but of the hard lessons learned and the strength gained. In reclaiming that space, I reclaimed pieces of myself that had been lost along the way. I thought often about the future, uncertain territories filled with both possibility and shadows. But rather than fear, I felt readiness, preparedness born from journeying through hardship, from living through betrayal and emerging with dignity intact. I had learned that peace was not the absence of conflict, but the willingness to stand firm regardless. In quiet moments, I would say to myself the truth I'd come to believe. I paid for her education. I gave her a home. And now I take back my peace. Some gifts, I realized, are not freely given. They must be earned and guarded. I was not the man who had walked through that door years ago with open hands and an unwavering heart. I was someone reborn through endurance, shaped by the fires of conflict and tempered by the steady light of justice. The peace I found was neither hollow nor fleeting. It was the product of a long, arduous fight, the quiet victory of a man who refused to be broken by betrayal. I had reclaimed more than property or control. I had reclaimed my dignity, my voice, my sense of worth. As I sat in the soft glow of an evening lamp, the house alive with the gentle sounds of family around me, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude, not for the battles fought, but for the strength uncovered. The scars remained, reminders of the price paid, but they no longer defined the life I chose to live. I was a provider still, only now I provided for myself. Stronger, steady, and free from the shackles of resentment. In that freedom, I found a truth that anchored me. True power comes not from what others give or take, but from the peace we claim when we stand firm, honor intact. And in claiming that peace, I knew I had truly won.